Hello there, CyberDudes. It is the CyberDudes podcast. We are on episode number, I don't know, 12, I think.
I think 12.
12. It's the 30th of September. I really should get these details sorted out. My name is Robin Thornton. He is Omar Sangarima. And how are you today, Omar?
Grand. I'm excited. It's going to be a nice day. I'm excited to see how fantasy football works out. Unfortunately, Barca lost yesterday. What can you do about it? But we're still at the top of the standings for now.
Yeah, I mean, they were going to be on for 9 out of 9, which would have been a league record. So I kind of think it's not too big of a.
No.
I mean, okay, yeah, you don't want to lose a game, but at the end of the day, like once you're getting into the rarefied atmosphere of breaking consecutive win records and things like that, you can't be surprised when you do lose.
Of course.
Yep. Okay, shall we get into the news? Right, so it has once again been a busy week. We have from Information Security Magazine, 82% of phishing sites now target mobile devices, which should not surprise anybody because we pretty much all use the internet on phones and tablets these days. I think really the only area that I use the internet on a computer is actually for work. We also have very, very naughty man, Eric Adams, mayor of New York City, told the FBI in relation to his indictment, a recent indictment for corruption charges involving apparently the Turkish government. He told the FBI he forgot his phone's passcode. A very, very clever thing to do from a former cop. He knows full well that if he were to offer that information to them, they don't actually need a warrant to be able to search his phone, which is a very important point. Never volunteer information over to the cops, because then it means they have far more power than they would otherwise need in terms of having to jump through the hoops of going to a judge. That's similar sort of thing with the Face ID thing, and one of the sort of shortfalls of it is that they could just grab your phone and hold your phone up to your face and make you unlock it in that kind of way. But yes, naughty man. I'll be honest, I don't like him. I've talked to a guy who does cyber for New York City, and he says that he filled the entire administration with former cop buddies, who many of whom are kind of clowns. Apparently, the CISO for the city. Well, what couple of things were you looking into with regards to Russia and cybercrime and all of its various facets?
I love the part where you say this could be a blessing or a curse, because with something so broad, and the two of us, we're pretty affable chaps in our own right. We get along pretty well. You and I in particular. Mm-hmm. This could be a 17-hour podcast. It really could. A Dan Carlin special.
This is where the discipline's necessary in terms of picking out the topics and being pointed about it.
Of course. So I really tried to take a look at it. Recency bias, confirmation bias, of course. I just finished Grand Strategy. Great book. Highly recommend it. He went from the time of the Athenian democracy to now, and strategic stuff and whatnot. And one of the key points there was Karl von Clausewitz on war, a seminal text where war should be a continuation of politics. It should have an end. It should be pointed at something that you want to get done. Might not be, of course. We could argue the nitty-gritty of should it even be on the table to do, but we live in the real world, so it is. But it's constrained by political ends. You want to go to war for something. The concept that kept like a spur in my mind, especially with Russia and cyber war, or cyber attacks and cyber warfare, is the concept of inverting that trope for many years. And von Clausewitz was after the total war nonsense, of course, that happened in Europe. I would imagine, eminently familiar with just the historical. Mm-hmm. You go through and you're trying to win a war, and by the way, you're burning stuff on the way. That helps nobody. When the thing gets done, you want to be able to eat later. So Clausewitz came, set that standard, and that's what I think geopolitics tried to hew to with World War One, World War Two, some of the
Hmm.
conflicts there later. But I think that's been inverted now by the concept of hybrid warfare, new generation warfare, and the Russian state's look and employment of cyber tactics in a really newfangled way of a new spin on total war, where instead of warfare being a continuation or a means to get to a political end,
Hmm.
politics then become a means to engage in overall overarching warfare a bit better. So you have cyber concepts obviously play a huge role in that because of the digitalization of the
Hmm.
world, the interconnectivity there. So I think that taking a look at Russia and cyber warfare from the fact of, hey, this is not just something that they do and that they have a couple nerds in a basement knockout. This is a pillar of their overall
Mm.
strategy when with which they engage neighbors near and far. And I think that gone are the days where we can consider the concept that also kept coming to me was remember in World War One into World War Two, where then air superiority became like a holy
Yeah.
crap, this is a new thing. And by the way, it's so devastatingly effective that
Yeah.
it has to reconfigure what the concept of a defensible position, what that means,
Hmm.
right? As
Yeah.
long as you're good from an on land basis, and air air power just literally, I'm not trying to be glib here, blew that out of
Yeah.
the concept that you're no longer just you have to consider this other venue, this other vector of warfare. I think we're at the stage now that, and we're seeing it up close. This is why I really harped on this and I went down this rabbit hole. You're
Yeah.
seeing it up close in Russia versus Ukraine. And you
Mhm.
saw it leading up to it with Russia versus, take a pick of what it did to its neighbors in the 10, 15 years even prior
Oh, is it like
to
Georgia,
Georgia,
Chechnya?
Chechnya, and it's one of those things that I think is can be disproportionately effective.
Hmm.
And for some reason, see, this is the where I need your take on it here too.
Okay.
Where air superiority came into play during that World War One, World War Two changeover, people got the message. Like, holy
Yeah.
shit, this is here to stay. For some reason, I still think the world at large is slow to recognize that cyber tactics employed to terrible perfection, I'll say, by the
Hmm.
Russian state, they are here to stay. I don't think we get into there's any kinetic conflict that happens henceforth that doesn't have as a big precursor and as a
Yeah.
component throughout the conflict the cyber angle anymore. That it's here to stay.
Yeah. Oh God, interesting. Lots to unpack there. Yeah, I mean, the first thing you said about the moment you mentioned World War One, triggered in my head the notion that I think part of the reason that that conflict in particular dragged on for so long was because it was we're used to trench warfare, but now we've sort of thrown very, very long range artillery into it. We also now have actual machine guns as well, and now we're just in this very, very big sort of stalemate. And then I don't know, military historians correct me on this, but the air power piece will I imagine would have done somewhat to break the stalemate to some degree. And then yeah, you're right. By the time you get to World War II, it's very much like the Messerschmitts are very effective weapons. The Hurricanes, Spitfires, the P-51s as well. So and that was really a case of okay, let's go do this. Let's lean into air warfare, and that's been the case for the last 70, 80 years. Basically,
Of
the
course.
the best way of suppressing a population historically has just been to bomb the living daylights out of them, which is why the US has 12 aircraft carriers. If you can move an air base around the world, you can project your power halfway around the world. And nobody else has really come close in carrier numbers since. I think the maximum that anybody has had post World War II to date has been the Brits and the French with two each.
Hmm.
I think the Chinese are now on three,
Yeah.
or they're about to be.
Hmm.
But that's really that. I think that the point about yes, the change up of warfare into the cyberspace. I think you're right. I think people are sleeping on it. I kind of think that's partly as a symptom of too much information. There's too much kind of going on. There's too much, and we can get into this in a later episode. There's too much misinformation. There's too much confusion. There's too little trust in the institutions, not least because of the monetization of media, which forces perverse incentives. And I think what it does is the monetization of media, to the extent that it has been in the social media age, has perverted journalism to the degree that it is a popularity contest akin to kind of like high school. So that's an interesting kind of aspect to that. But also I think the other angle with it is, and not so much why people have been sleeping on it, but why Russia is so good at it, is for the last, half decade and more, US went very carrier first, project power across the globe first, and air force in that kind of manner. Russia have gone so heavily cyber first, I think, particularly since Putin has been in power, which I think it's probably most of my adult life now, if not all of it. For that period of time, Putin started in military intelligence, so he kind of knows the value of data and espionage and being able to get under your enemy's sort of skin. And I think there's no better way of doing that than to get into their communication apparatus, which you'll see in the way that they've conducted their operations in Ukraine. It wasn't just an invasion 2 years or prior, an invasion 2 years ago. It reaches all the way back to 2014 to the annexation of Crimea. But I think he's been, and I hate to give the guy credit because I think he's an absolute scumbag, but I think he's been very, very visionary about doing that, because it kind of means everybody else is to a somewhat of a degree sort of playing catch up. Now, I don't necessarily think, I think we see Russian, Chinese, North Korean, Iranian cyber capabilities much more than we see our own, because we're obviously not victims of our own.
Sure.
To a large extent, there is organized crime within the US and within other Western nations that causes problems. But in terms of state-sponsored, cyber operations, we are obviously not going to be hitting ourselves if we've got any sense about us.
We are in the top 5, though. I did find a pretty neat new cybercrime index that just goes across a myriad of factors. And to your point, it's not going to be front and center for us because, knock on wood, we're not the target of it too often. I'm pretty cynical, so I'll say too often, not all the time. But we're in the top 5. Russia's up there, Ukraine's up there, China, the US, Nigeria, Romania, North Korea, the UK.
I think it depends as well in terms of the context of how you're talking about the cyber crime piece. I think whether it's cyber espionage or whether it's actual cyber crime, I think Ukraine are up there on the basis of it's by sheer necessity, and they've known that they've needed to do it since NotPetya in 2017, because that was one of the first shots in terms of going into Ukraine, which incidentally is a Putin ambition thing to restore old Soviet borders. Some of the terrain in Ukraine is part of the old Soviet borders that are very, very easy to chock full of tank divisions and make sure that nobody can come and get at you. And the fact that what Russia was, lost that when Ukraine got its independence after the fall of the Soviet Union, I think probably burns him somewhat. He doesn't like that there's Ukraine's basically a big gaping highway into his territory.
When he closes his eyes, I really feel he sees the old map, and he sees the difference between what it is and what it was.
He doesn't just see it as, I don't think he just sees it as the old map either. I think he sees it as a great big like risk board game board but
Mhm.
in a way that everybody, like, he is actually playing Risk on it, and everybody else for some reason is playing checkers on that thing.
Yes, and to your point, there's something to be said, and I share your disdain for tipping your cap in any way, shape, or form to the man, but he's playing on time horizons that very few other world leaders can even remotely entertain. There's
Well,
something to
yeah,
be said.
because
Yes,
he's consolidated all his power to a degree where he knows he won't he knows the only way that he loses that power is that he dies,
he does. Exactly.
which
And
I'm counting down the days.
oh, for sure. That's one of those where, my mom always says, don't be negative. Don't wish death on anybody. No, I think it'd be a grand, even normally on crazy world leader, nefarious person watch, I have those moments where I think of X and then, oh, what if so and so died? And then I go, oh, wait, is the power vacuum going to be worse? This
Oh,
is
it's
one of the right. This is one
uh,
of those cases where I say we have to try something else. This guy, he's
yeah.
the
I was
worst.
thinking as I was saying that, I was thinking, oh, but what if we fall into the Command and Conquer Red Alert sort of scenario
Thousand
where
percent.
we do actually get
Yep.
a much worse
Yep.
situation.
Sure.
The but having said, I mean, going back to that list though, because you've got your nation state actors, the people who are up there because they do it as a matter of national strategic capability, and then you've got your Nigerias who are there because they are it used to be the trope of the Nigerian
Prince.
prince advanced fee scam where you'll get a payout of $1 million or so bucks or something like that because some Nigerian prince has to give away his money. They've now moved quite heavily into sextortion, and they're a cause of an
Yes.
awful lot of suicides and attempted suicides of Westerners. I mean, and not, when I say awful lot, it's not like, oh, this is in the tens of thousands or something like that, but to a number that is unacceptable
Yes.
in the
Good way to say it. Absolutely. The
context
uptick.
of
The
what you would
uptick is
expect.
stark. It really is.
Yeah. Brazil also there, I think, as a sort of halfway house between. I think it's part of it is a state thing and also like just a lot of scams. And then, and this has been a thing that I know you are aware, that has always tickled me for as long as we have worked together, is the fact that Romania is there largely on the basis that they, for some reason, just have the most freakishly good internet in Europe.
Listen, it's the reason is, and I got this. I remember having worked with folks from that region in one of my first
Hmm.
sets of jobs. He explained it to me so succinctly. He goes, bro, because it's all new.
Yeah,
Most of our
yeah.
infrastructure got bombed to shit. And then when we
Hmm.
rebuilt it, we just went 5G, baby. Like, not at the time it wasn't, but the
Yeah,
equivalent,
but
essentially.
future proofing it, yeah.
Yeah. So I go, man, I never thought of it that way. He's like, yeah, bro. You get faster
Yeah,
Wi-Fi over in Kosovo than you would here some days. And I go, I never thought of that, but he was right. He was right.
yeah. Absolutely amazing. So, okay, so some of the broader bits and pieces. Let's go into why. I mean, why is this such a big thing for Putin though? And the bit that I always come back to is it's relatively much less visible than any physical means of warfare. You can't necessarily point the finger quite as easily, but that goes to it being the plausible deniability is massive, isn't it?
It's you can do a whole heck of a lot of fuckery with a really disproportionately low amount of blowback
Mm.
than with almost any way to flex power. Because even in something that I would think would be akin to this, which is maybe along the social engineering or the diplomatic spy type apparatus, which I think you get a little less blowback than, of course, straight up kinetically marching or sending tanks across a border. Even with that, it's almost there's much more recognition of, okay, sure, that you're a shill for XYZ government, you're a front for the
Yeah,
Russian war machine. When you add the anonymity inherent to the interwebs, that also that just gets disproportionately much larger. You can
yeah,
disavow a whole hell of a lot more and do it a lot easier
Yep.
than you ever could with putting anybody in the field and working an asset that way, like a human sort of intelligence.
Yeah. Well, actually,
Mhm.
as well, there's no one to. I mean, unless they are operating from a place that is not your country, you being the attacker, they're very hard to catch as well. And I know this
Sure.
is a thing that where we work as a we say this on a fairly regular basis because people do ask us, oh, well, why don't we hit back at whoever it is? And number
Mhm.
one, the answer ends up being, well, attribution's actually quite difficult. It takes a
Hugely
lot of,
difficult.
it takes a lot of time and resources because these people deliberately put time and effort into hiding their tracks. Number two, hitting back as, say, for instance, a private entity, that's vigilantism. And I'm not sure the FBI
Yes.
and whoever else would look too kindly upon that. The other
That's
angle
some comic
is,
book shit right there. I
yeah,
see what you're saying. Yeah.
the other angle is it's expensive to do so, and your resources are better spent on defending, like
Prevention.
sorting out the issue and defending. And finally, poke the bear,
There's
which is a
there's
neat
even
segue.
no, it is. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful segue, and I think because one of the places where I believe public sentiment was highest for that type of let's hack back
Hmm.
was the Colonial Pipeline
Yeah.
mess.
And
And
I'm
I
pretty sure
think,
we probably did.
oh no, I think we did, but here's it, and look at you. We're giving each other segues left and right here. We hacked back, and what I mean we though, it was official, non-official. It was FBI, it was CIA, it was
Mhm.
NSA. It
Oh
was
yeah,
folks that are professionals that know what the hell they're doing and can poke the bear in proportionate response fashion,
yeah,
not poke the bear and whoopsie, we have them on high alert and now they want to get kinetic stuff involved. I think that's always my fear, at least, and many other people's fear, smarter people than me, when we hear let's hack back. Well, sure, as you said, it's hard to pinpoint who and where. That's
yeah.
already a level of difficulty. But then it can go sideways very quickly, and you can start opening cans of corn on the receiver end, where then it's not a proportional response, and
Hmm.
we're off to the races in terms of having cooler heads hopefully prevail on either side. It can get very messy very quickly because of just the nature of the interconnectivity of systems.
Which I was about to say, it's the CrowdStrike debacle of July is a classic example of that,
Sure.
whereby infrastructure transcends
Borders.
national sovereign
Hmm.
boundaries,
Hmm.
and the you by going trying to hit one perceived adversary, you could potentially piss off and cripple a bunch of your allies as well, which probably then doesn't do you. I mean, you could it's the equivalent of kind of like shooting yourself in the foot, scoring an own goal,
Or say you
stepping
could
on
say, and you
rakes.
could
It's
say
it's
whoops,
whatever.
but who
Yeah,
cares? Yeah.
yeah, because you've been careless about it. Well, let's not go into hitting your allies with whoops. Um, it's been enough of that between Western forces when we were in Afghanistan
Yeah.
together, which is somewhere
And
we never should have been as well.
I agree, and also back on the cyber context, I think the concept of the five eyes and eight eyes and however the hell many eyes you want to add to the pot there. Even with that, it's a Greek mythical creature, right? At this point, that many eyes, but it's
Cthulhu.
yeah, oh goodness, but it's it's also a matter of from the cyber angle, even with that sort of coordination, things happen, things get through. And to your point, you brought up, I think, one of the watershed examples of it was NotPetya.
Mm, yeah. That said, we have to we have to recognize the fact that and we did the segment on it. We have to recognize we started that, or not
Yes, we did.
we. I can't say we because
No,
I'm not part of it. But yeah, the CIA and Mossad started that
Stuxnet.
with Stuxnet against the
Mhm.
Iranians. I think that was a well calculated thing though, because and I think it's probably part of the reason why the Iranians are now quite so good at what they
Proficient.
do as well, because they realized, oh shit, they caught us with our pants down. They've cost us an awful lot of money in terms of our nuclear program, and we want to get back at them. Plus, I know a few Iranians, well, smart people.
Oh,
Really, really clever.
There's no lack of smart folks in that entire region, and when you put it through the prism of never again, I think is where, you know, that country in particular says you're not going to catch us slipping again. But then I hold it up next to, say, like a DPRK, right?
Mm-hmm.
Democratic People's Republic of Korea, North Korea. I think they have similarities that in Iran in terms of their sanctions. They're not allowed to play in certain pools of international monetary liquidity or just straight trade. So they're forced to get proficient in ways that will allow them to still matter in geopolitics, and also potentially get a little coin on the side to fund, sadly, in both cases, what I think, to fund nuclear programs primarily.
So actually, that's a good. Oh, we've got segues on segues here. That's a good segue in from the perspective of sanctions, because actually this is where I say that Putin plays a very, very well laid out game that favors him, no matter what his adversaries do, on the perspective of, you know, went into Ukraine in February 22, probably knew that he was going to get piled on with international sanctions, and he was going to lose oil and gas revenue. Maybe didn't think to the extent that he did, but with the way that cryptocurrency is going in terms of its adoption and ever increasing price on the long term, because it's volatile as hell. Incidentally, do you see there's a new coin called the Mudeng? It's Deng coin or something like that. Ridiculous. It's 100 mil market cap already. Absolutely absurd. But with the rise of cryptocurrency and the ease with which you can transfer digital funds, with the loss of the oil and gas revenue that Russia had, with their proficiency that already existed in ransomware, because 2017 NotPetya was long before they were slapped with quite as many sanctions as they have now. He's got another revenue stream. Not that he needs it, because the sort of wider opinion is that the man's a multi-billionaire.
He's doing okay.
Much as he's got a very, very modest, trying to pretend that they're still a communist society kind of salary from the Kremlin.
When the national gas interests of Russia
belong to five guys,
and also with burgers and fries, and you can wet your beak at any of those troughs at any point in time, that the Forbes list is a fake at this point, and it has been for many years in my mind, because you can't. I love that they try to put El Chapo on there. Just they kind of did a little blurb on him, I think, a couple years ago before he got caught for the 17th time. Maybe it looks like the time that it'll stick. But yeah, he's despot rich.
Yeah,
he's strongman, totalitarian, authoritarian leader rich. That's a different level. He's fine.
Shall we get into segues upon segues, because we've been teasing this for about 5 minutes now.
Let's do it.
So the segue, our original, I actually forgotten the second one. The original one was just talking about poking the bears, which incidentally helps us answer the question of how does Russia do this? And namely, it's what's called, and not everybody, but most nations that screw around in the cyber realm have these. They're called Advanced Persistent Threat Groups, or APTs. All of these APTs have, many of them, some of them don't have an APT number, but many of them, all the established and agreed to be in existence ones do. Russia has several of them, and they're essentially state-sponsored hacking groups. They may be directly part of the intelligence apparatus of the government. They may be totally separate, but working under the direction of or under the permission of said government, or they may have some sort of a hybrid kind of deal going on. But the interesting thing, and this does come from this is CrowdStrike's nomenclature, is we speak of the bears poking the bears. All of Russia's APTs are nicknamed for bears. We have Fancy Bear, we have Cozy Bear. I say all of, that's actually a bit of a lie. There is Sandworm. I think that's somebody else's. Naming convention. One thing I do find really funny about this is, yes, Russia's associated with bears, like actual grizzly bears, but also I think it's really, really funny that for a country that has such a proclivity for homophobic kind of attitudes, that all of the hacking groups are called bears, just big burly gay men.
Yeah,
it's very amusing for me.
I think that I'm not going to say that was done on purpose, but
no, but it's a nice little yes,
it's a nice bonus.
Yeah,
it's a nice added benefit.
Whether it winds them up, but let's get into a few of these, because I have details and there are affiliations. So APT-28, Fancy Bear, affiliated with the GRU, which is the Russian military intelligence. Now, I want to do this because I want to actually try and see if I can say it. I've always been curious as to what the GRU actually stands for, because it doesn't make any sense, and it is, if I can find it here, the Glavnoye Razvedivatelnoye Upravlenie.
I heard GRU right there.
There's GRU there, but which translates to Main Intelligence Directorate, and they are effectively the Russian equivalent of the DIA, which is the Defense Intelligence Agency. Yeah. So they are Fancy Bear, affiliated with the GRU. They focus on cyber espionage, political disruption, disinformation, and destructive attacks, which should tell you everything about the ways that they like to screw around in what we see in the Western world. Notable operations: they've hacked the DNC, which was Hillary's emails in 2016. If you want any clues as to who Vladimir would rather have in the White House, that is it. Be under no illusions. Disruption in the conflict during conflicts in Ukraine. They also have attacked NATO, European governments, and military organizations. They like to fish and spearfish. They exploit zero-day vulnerabilities, so those gaps in software or those flaws in software that aren't yet known by the makers of said software. Credential harvesting as well. They absolutely love stealing people's login details, because why try and batter down the front door when you can just use the key? They use custom malware called Sednit and X-Agent for doing that. And then also they like destructive attacks as well. So they've employed malware called Kill Disk, which basically deletes or renders systems inoperable.
They're the big. I remember doing research, and just generally in our course of work, they were big on wipers, and they still are.
NotPetya was a wiper worm.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. APT-29, Cozy Bear. I don't know why they're cozy. Affiliated with the FSB and SVR, which are the equivalents of FSB is a hybrid of the FBI and the NSA. SVR would be the CIA.
Yeah.
They again focus on cyber espionage, long-term intelligence gathering. These guys are the ones who are believed to have conducted SolarWinds in 2020, which was a big old supply chain attack, get into one entity that has hooks into many other people to whom you are interested in.
They like lurking and staying there and gathering as much information wherever the hell they can be for as long as they can remain undetected. That's the long-term aspect of that, yeah.
Which really makes a massive amount of sense when they're the equivalent of the CIA and the NSA, or affiliated with. Again, they like spearfishing, they like credential theft. Spearfishing, that very, very targeted form of phishing. A good number of people probably don't need to worry about spearfishing per se, because it is targeted. You do have to be someone who is known to have something of value, but it is always worth knowing that it exists and what it's about. They like the supply chain attacks again, the stealth and persistence angle, specifically to your point for intelligence gathering, and exfiltration and encryption.
Their techniques, because of that persistence angle, they are a good group, and I use good very loosely, a good group to study for live off the land techniques, where you can get into a system and instead of trying to hammer, like you said, hammer the front door with all these hacking tools and tricks, you're able to harness what is already available in the environment to do your recon and to help with your persistence. So you essentially don't set off any alarm bells. You just use what you're able to. So picture you getting into a house, but then conducting any sort of thievery with bags that were in the house already, putting on gloves that were in the house already, using things that are already there in order to not raise any eyebrows. And that is, it just, again, like you said, it adds to their ability to remain really undetected. Whenever I hear a story in the news about XYZ group, before even hearing who it is,
try and guess.
A lot of times, you can with the type of stuff that they get up to.
Yeah. Moving on, we've got Sandworm, which is affiliated with the GRU. Now, it would appear to be a full-on GRU unit, not just a affiliated. They are called Unit 74455 in the intelligence community. They're like disruption, sabotage, and destructive attacks on critical infrastructure. This is military-grade hacking. They caused blackouts of the Ukraine power grid in 2015, 2016. That's really where it started being a cyber test range for Russian cyber offensive. Government, Kremlin, sort of associated with this evil group, pure criminal, suspected ties to the government, but they are largely in it for themselves. And this is where the ransomware comes from, which was actually our second layered segue in there with regards to sanctions, sources of funding, etc., etc. What do you know about Evil Corp?
Evil Corp, it's, I think, a good example, and the folks that I was doing research on the side here was the Colonial Pipeline folks. So it wasn't Energetic Bear, was it was Dark Side Group.
Okay.
Remember those cats? And well, but there was a lot of folks that thought it was Energetic Bear because of the target and this sort of solution. But I mean, Evil Corp, Evil Group, Dark Side Group.
They run like corporations.
They are absolutely run like corporations. I don't want to say that it reminded me of Sir Francis Drake and just being given a charter to be a pirate to the enemies of a nation. I think we're seeing a similar sort of situation here. Yes, you can get rich on your own so long as it's off of targets that are not part of the crown, part of the Russian Federation or allied.
Don't poke the eagle.
I don't
or the
see
bulldog.
Belarus getting targeted too much, and I wonder why. And it's a wonder to no one, because you have bootlickers in satellite countries that are just, I love Putin, and they have it on a shirt and they just walk around in public with it, right? They might as well.
They're not that wealthy though either. It's not that.
Listen,
it's not that lucrative.
I understand, but even as like a staging ground, they're just they're left alone, or they're worked around because they bend the knee to the right type of person in that situation. But Evil Group, Dark Side Group, these are all, they're run like corporations. They can make their money on the side. Think they funnel. It's my opinion that a lot of these groups funnel a lot of brain power to and from the groups you mentioned. I think if you have any, so it's essentially like a farm team for cyber operators
Yeah.
to be able to, and they're not, maybe if not explicitly protected by the Russian government, at the very least, so long as it's not targeting Russian interests, you can have a warrant out for them, and if they're in Russia, you're not touching them.
No, it's very much a non-compliance kind of.
Period.
It's a we protect them by just telling you to go kick rocks.
Exactly. So, yeah, good point.
Yeah, yeah. So Evil Corp, they like. I should go into the corporation piece. This is mad. They have malware development divisions. They have developers who do the exploits, who actually find and code the exploits. They have money mules and laundering operations as well, and even dedicated ransom negotiators. So there's people with different skills. It's not just one or two guys doing all of it. It's actual divisions of people with specific skills and specific mandates doing specific things to further the goals of the organization, which is ultimately extort money.
I just love that. I wanted you to say it in a certain way, so I'm going to say it. They have a marketing and comms department.
Yeah.
It's incredible to think of this, but it's run essentially like a legit corporation, a for-profit enterprise.
Well, because here's the other thing as well. They're not just doing it for themselves. They also do this as a service for other people as well.
Yep.
Like they've actually, pardon me, they've actually turned it into a business, and they will take a service, and they will take the cut of, and this is the other bit of it as well, is that they will, when they do it as a service, they can take the cut of the winnings or the booty or the loot, whatever you want to call it, but because it's somebody else that they, that was effectively people that are like behind it. I look at it as this kind of like a shared culpability there. There's like, oh, okay, well, yeah, well, we actually did the do, but they were the ones who wanted to.
It's a perversion.
Actually, the ones who wanted to hurt you.
It's a perversion of the shared responsibility model.
Oh yeah, so much.
Essentially, it's just, I did ping you with the phrase I've heard is dark Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
Like this is just and I think we're both trying to stress the point. It's at that level. These aren't just weird folks in their mother's basements with Cheeto fingers and no lives, and that concept is gone, really. Maybe some of them are, and I don't want to anger any of my Cheeto fingered friends. I think y'all are doing great work. Please do not target me or my family. But it's a matter of, this is a job. This is a life you can get into, and it's also done to a level of rigor. These are sometimes, sadly, could be some of the best development minds in that region that just break bad and make a heck of a lot of money and are given protection and impunity from their home government.
Yeah.
This is not just, like you said, one or two rogue weirdos doing stuff. No, it's an apparatus. It is a substructure that supports official goings on at the national level in this country.
Yep. That said, that isn't, I think you said it earlier, that is only to the extent that it aligns with foreign interests. Because actually, if you do something that falls outside the boundaries of what you want, you're very, very well, at the very least, you're going to find yourself in a Siberian gulag for the next 20 years.
100%. Wishing you died, or straight up, you get disappeared, right? Haven't we said that a couple times? Yeah, straight up disappeared. Yeah,
absolutely. Now, Evil Corp is not actually where it ends either, because as much as they use a what's called a banking malware called Drydex, they do also use ransomware as well. They spawned Revil Group, which actually was the ransomware as a service group. They're the ones who made it into a sort of like a service economy kind of paradigm. Then I do actually forget where Lockbit originated from, but Lockbit I can't remember whether it was an offshoot of Evil, but they are without doubt the most prolific bunch of fuckers going from the ransomware perspective, aren't they?
Yeah, and prolific is an absolute word for it because, again, while we might have problems for attribution of physical time and space, where did this come from? Who is it? You can still see Lockbit's fingerprints on a lot of attacks that may not have originated from Lockbit themselves. That
Oh, are
as
you
a
pitching it?
service. Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, you're pitching it scattered spider and stuff like that here, because that's the other thing as well. This isn't just. It's unfortunate this isn't just isolated to Russia. They collaborate with individuals in other countries as well, sometimes in the States and the UK and other NATO nations. That these people, and lots of them are kids.
Yeah.
They're 17, 18, 19 years old, looking for big old paydays because. And here's where we hark back to the monetization of the internet and social media and all of that sort of stuff, and the perverse incentives that come from it. There's some of these kids want the boats, the cars, the women,
the Lambos.
Yeah,
want
exactly.
Those Lamborghinis, bro.
And they want to get rich quick and keep up with the crypto bros.
Yeah.
At least that's my contention.
It's one of those and there's an apparatus. I want to keep stressing. This is not haphazard. This is not done willy-nilly. There is a distinct recruitment apparatus at many levels where that type of individual is targeted for inclusion into these groups, because you never know where the next great idea can happen. Development brilliance can be found in many nooks and crannies across the world. If you're good at this tech stuff, you could potentially be on a list somewhere going, hey, Putin might need you and you can make some money. It's done at this level. The biggest thing from the research for this episode, Robin, that I came away with was it's not accidental. This is a piece of the fabric of how that particular country, and potentially ours too, I'll say, it's just that country does politics, how that country operates in the world as a political entity. This is now a pillar of their tool set, the cyber angle.
Yeah, and there's multiple aspects to this as well, right? And we've already said, there's the mutual benefit piece with regards to espionage and information gathering. So, the Kremlin can go and gather stuff, or the Kremlin can gather stuff from third parties that they may not otherwise be able to get without leaving their paw prints all over. By the same token, the individual groups or the pure crime groups who are looking for a payday benefit from the intelligence that comes from having an entire state behind you. The Kremlin gets to deny all responsibility of anything that is going on with individuals who are not explicitly associated with them. Not that anybody necessarily believes it, or if they've got an ounce of sense, they won't believe it. That allows them as well. And again, and this is where I say, Putin's playing expert levels of risk, where other players are playing the completely wrong game, checkers, on the game board. Election interference, fostering division, getting really deep into there's loads of stuff on the internet now and on social media about what are bot accounts, and how do they influence discourse and discussion within the public sphere. How much of what you actually see in the comments section is real people with real honestly held opinions, and how much do you see that is just engineered in order to try and steer you in a certain way? Because guess what, groupthink and the bystander effect and all of that sort of stuff is completely real, and everybody is potentially susceptible to it. I think especially all of those people who call other people sheep, because this is a different kind of. It's just a different kind of. You're
just a brainwashed liberal, bro.
Yeah,
you stop it right now. Yeah.
I know. No, it's like, oh, how original. I haven't heard that from you and several other 1,000 other people with whom you share exactly the same opinion. The irony, ironic much?
What,
it's ridiculous.
And here's the thing. I don't want folks with a longer view of what we're talking about to poo-poo what we're trying to say. Hey, fomenting dissent in a target country before potentially rolling kinetic forces into that country isn't anything new. Of course not. This has been since the dawn of time. I remember playing many iterations of one of my favorite games, Total War. It was a legitimate set of tactics you could use. What I think we're trying to harp on here or drive the point home is the acceleration of the efficacy of those types of efforts through digital formats. It's easier than ever to do that. And I would even argue, and I'm not sure, I don't know if it's an argument with you, I don't think we would differ too much on this point, that it's getting so easy to do that sometimes you don't even need to roll tanks into a situation if you can just completely harness a national discourse, plant enough bots, inflame enough crazy tensions to just have a country divided upon itself. If this sounds familiar, it really fucking should. You can do this, and it advances very real political aims that an enemy of a country might have. You don't need to send tanks if you can just have them have us biting at our own brethren here.
Yeah, get them to elect absolutely insane people who have no business being there. Marjorie and Lauren. It's just, and that's the thing. That is really playing the long game. Is, like you say, we don't need to roll the tanks in. Just get the people so riled up and pissed off that they will vote for an insane, incompetent individual who simply has a good pulse on being able to speak what they're thinking, or kind of like speak to the kind of like their most system one version, that the version of them that thinks without considering.
And it's easy to do that. I looked it up while we were talking.
Go ahead.
When you have a time horizon on activity that spans as of today, roughly 25 years. Putin's been around and kicking since 99. I cannot believe it. I was a junior in high school when he first got there, and I'm about to be 40 years old in December, and he's been running in some form or fashion, doing the president, prime minister samba that he does. And I think he even gave that up in 2012, where he's just like, I just run.
Oh yeah, I know, because he just extended the term, or he just abolished the term limits
and kills political opposition. Straight up kills them, assassinates them, even if they go to sacrosanct places in the West, or should be sacrosanct places in the West. Doesn't matter. When you're playing on that sort of time horizon, you can play the sort of long games that I think then the digital frontier just allows you to play out, as you said, a 4-dimensional chess game when other folks are still trying to tie their shoes and don't know they're in a race yet. That really, that's the point I want to drive home.
And here we go. Here's another one. That's not something that we are not guilty of as well.
Of course.
Plenty of instances of that throughout the 20th century.
Look at it's not just South America.
But it's also it's not just Russia that does it to us as well. There's plenty of examples in the last few years of politicians, close aides being found out to have had links with the Chinese government, or straight up being an operative of said government.
Not even links.
She's
straight up indie employee.
It's genuinely wild. But then it's kind of the thing that I think that's one of the areas, and I'm absolutely not criticizing multiculturalism in any way, shape, or form, but it is one of those things that multiculturalism can expose you to, because if you send a white guy over to China as a political aid. Holy shit, is he sticking out like a sore thumb?
1,000%. 1,000%. And that they're tracked from the second they get there.
Mhm.
It's just, but it's par for the course, right? It's the realization that this happens. What I don't get is that in certain circles, I can mention even some of these ideas, and it's like, oh wow, you're really a nihilist, or you're very cynical, or no,
Yeah.
I just consider myself a pragmatist. This has been done on the world stage forever.
Yeah.
I don't think it's ever going to stop. And I just realized that the little niche that I'm a part of in the cyber world is now a absolutely vital component of any sort of activities and operations that are done to influence geopolitics. It's here to stay. I don't understand why speaking like this is. Don't fit me for a tinfoil hat. It's just the real politic side of the game of things here.
Well, and there's the other another angle to that as well, is that it's the fomenting dissatisfaction or contempt between others. Is it makes, if you can achieve that with your enemies, that makes the likelihood and ease of them banding together as a consolidated unit against you when it is actually revealed that you're the one who's been doing all of that. Like, it's a basic impossibility. You're not going to get that kind of unity. I mean, absolutely not a cyber sort of topic at all, but I will go on record as saying I think the only thing now that unites people as a whole is finding life on another planet.
Listen, either that, or I hate to say this, and I'm really not trying to be glib. I'm saying it because
I know where you're going with this.
What? I was going to say sports.
Oh.
No, what? The oceans? Where the hell did you think I was going to go? No, come on.
No, I thought you were talking about big red button missiles.
Oh, no, listen, that's a whole other, we could do a whole other episode on that. I don't want to bring that one up there.
That's definitely not cyber. No, sports could, yeah, but then you see the division that the Ronaldo Messi thing causes.
It shouldn't. There's really one answer to that.
Oh, I'm not getting into it. I'm not getting into it. No, I am. Ronaldo's the more complete athlete.
Stop it right now, kid.
Messi's the better footballer, but Ronaldo's the more complete athlete. See how I don't actually technically take a side there.
Complete athlete? What? Like he can do pull-ups? Like who cares?
The real one is Haaland or Mbappe.
Yeah,
Haaland. I'm not biased.
No, I know. Hey, of course, but even I gotta agree with you there. Absolutely, he's been on a tear.
It is partly to do with the kind of service that he gets, because actually, if you don't give him the ball, that he's largely useless.
Stay humble.
Okay.
Right, stay humble.
Yeah. he's a different breed this season, though, having had a proper summer break.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I'm mostly out of stuff that I had. What else? Any other thoughts on Russia?
I think it's madness to not consider them on the geopolitical sphere a consistent enemy or a consistent rival. And I think that, again, the state, not the people.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I want to make that distinction absolutely clear.
Well, the people are having $500 million spent against them in order to keep them nice and insulated from the rest of the world's internet.
Yeah.
Like you said last week, 3 internets.
There's 3.
China, Russia, rest of the world.
The rest of the world's internet. And those are long-reaching, there will be long-reaching effects from those activities. Then, in 20 years, how do you bring those 3 internets back into one cohesive mega internet?
Oh, it's going to be like the Constantinople meeting thing about the Bibles.
Yep. It's really, you're going to need a synod, and you're going to need people to uncrack those ledgers. But I think you have to realize that. You have to realize that cyber is a here to stay component on that game board, and to think otherwise regardless of, again, I want to say regardless of what side of the political spectrum you're on, nothing in my mind labels you an absolute moron if you don't think that that's going on. Just that hey, it's active, it's
Yeah.
on purpose, and it's targeted. If we can't even come to, hey, let's agree there, I don't got time for it.
The other thing that I'll layer on to the "you're an absolute moron" if is, I'll admit this, my opinions will undoubtedly be swayed one way or the other by things that I see on the internet. You're an absolute fucking moron if you think you are completely impervious to foreign influence on social media, i.e., if you're the kind of person who calls other people sheep, you're an idiot. I will tell you now.
Brainwashed.
Yeah.
Right.
Brainwashed idiot. And possibly a cult follower.
It happens to both of us. We're in this field.
So everybody.
And we still realize it. The only saving grace is potentially just maybe understanding that the magician is doing tricks.
Yeah.
At certain points, that's the only saving grace. And like you said the other day, sometimes the brain don't want a brain, and sometimes we're more susceptible. You and I, in particular, more susceptible to things than other times. But neither one of us, regardless, will say, "Oh, we're cyber folks, so we see where all the tricks happen, or we see the invisible strings on the cool kung fu movie." No, it happens to us.
I see very little more than anybody else. I would hazard.
Same
I mean,
here.
I think we probably do see slightly more than your average person, because we're in as a function of the jobs, we will be in more specific news feeds and information sources and that sort of stuff, and and see opinions from people who might not get the
mainstream
same sort of mainstream airtime, and not because there's some big bad cabal of people all high above that are trying to keep them out of it. It's because what they talk about is far too technical for your average individual to spend their attention on. So yeah, that really is that. But when it comes down to having self-awareness, checking one's own opinions, trying to sort of validate, am I being manipulated in one way or the other, or asking the question, why do I think this?
Mm-hmm.
Do I think this because it is part of my own internalized value system that I have had, and my way of thinking, and the fact that, say, for instance, I look at stuff on the basis of probability. I go, if the TikTok one was a classic example of this when we did that episode, is to say, who has my best interests, or who more has my best interests at heart, Western government or the Chinese government? And you can be glib, and you can be conspiracist and cynical and nihilistic all you want, and say no government has your interests at heart, but if it's one or the other, I know where I'm going with it.
Of course.
And it's that sort of thing. So there's that angle of, like, is this as a result of how I go through logic or how I put things together? Is this a result of my own internal value system, or am I forming these opinions on the basis of things that I see and the emotions that information or disinformation, as would be the case, the emotions that information or disinformation is driving, and is that what is then building my opinion and sense
narrative,
of reality on? Or I'm actually looking at specific verifiable fact and forming it off that.
And just realizing that, again, none of this per se are new concepts.
Nope.
But it's done, I think, in an easier, faster, and progressively harder to detect fashion.
It's
getting woven in. Exactly. So just the recognition there. That's all I ask.
I keep saying this, and I have been for several months now. We've hit a point in society and with technology where, unfortunately, and I think this is going to get worse with AI, where the technology is moving so much faster than your average person can keep up with. And this will have been the case in the Industrial Revolution, throughout the 20th century with the creation of the microchip and all that sort of stuff. But it is now happening at such a rate that the people who get it, the people who have the intellect and aptitude to get it, can harness this technology and leave those who don't get it or don't have that instant sort of click with that technology are leaving them further and further and further behind. It's like the widening of the wealth gap.
Yep, I think
that's a real problem.
Yeah. And like you said, now I think that gap is more stark. It can be more sudden, and it's more deeply entrenched, I feel, than in previous technological revolutions, especially when you bring into AI into the fray. You're right.
Absolutely. Right, on that bombshell, we will call it a day there. So thank you very much for listening to us. If you stayed the course, if you enjoyed this, please do hit the like button and subscribe to the channel on whatever platform it is, be it Spotify or YouTube or wherever else you're finding this. You can find this podcast also through Amazon Music. I think we're on iHeartRadio as well. Many places. So please do share the love. Share this with somebody else if you found this interesting. And we will be back again next week with just a new segment. And then there's some interviews lined up at some point later down the line.
I want to shout that out. We're always in the market for cool people to talk to. It's one of the things I got into the podcast to do. I like talking to you, Robin. I also like talking to anyone that we can get on and kind of pick their brain. And having Andy on the last time was a great episode. We've got great feedback. I'd love to sit and chat. If you have an opinion, if you have something you want to discuss, pitch it to us, let us know. We'll put you on. We'll dive in. We love conversation on anything and everything tech, anything and everything cyber.
Absolutely. Right, until next week, thank you and have a good one.
Adios.